Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest, Daniel Wrenne. Today's talk is all about finances, financial literacy, financial planning, retirement, and Daniel, he dubs himself as the non-obvious cause of the burnout epidemic in medicine, and I'm really happy to bring him on the show. So, Daniel, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, like I said, we were talking backstage. We speak the same language, and you're kind of like my bread and butter guest. So, kind of talk about your story, set the stage, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Yeah, so I have been in the financial advising business. I guess it's almost 20 years now. And when I started in the industry a while back, it was right out of college, and I kind of got into the business with good intentions. I think my goal was to really, help people with money. And I think a lot of people in our industry, it's a lot like medicine. In medicine, most of the physicians we work with have really good intentions. Like they want to help the patients. And that's the reason they got into medicine. And so I was kind of in the same boat. Like I got into financial advising. I'm like, well, I'd love to help people with their money, and that's the perfect career to go into out of college. And so that's the route I took. And so fast forward, I got into, the traditional system of financial advising, and really started to feel the pressure of like productivity and, selling more and hitting all the targets. And I quickly realized, it took me a little while. Unfortunately, it took me several years to realize this, but eventually realized that was the number one, was the productivity and the targets and hitting all those metrics and making money. And that was above taking the best care of the clients. And basically I was becoming like a salesperson that was like kind of disguised as a trusted advisor. And that was like directly conflicting with the reason I got into the business in the first place. I loved the practice, but I hated the system. And I think that's like, it's so common, and the physicians we work with, I think, struggle with this same challenge. I think a lot of them realize, at that point, I realized this. It's like something's got to change. Like this is not what I set out to do, and I hit that brick wall of like I got to change something. But that's when, like, as soon as you get there, you're like, fear, doubts, like, how can I do this? What? And then you're like, finances. How am I gonna pay my bills? And fortunately, I had like kind of like the tools. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more, but like I had like what I would consider like the key tools in place to allow me to make a pretty speedy transition. Like I had developed like solid financial literacy and had addressed like the big life questions to help give me direction. And so that was really what gave me the courage to make that big, scary change. And so what I did, when you get to that point, and when I got to that point, it's like, okay, there's a few options. I can make a big change and go kind of like recreate the practice of financial advising.
Yeah.
Or I can change within the system of like the financial services that I was in, or I could just completely change directions in career,
Yeah.
So I kind of hit that crossroad. I'm like, I could, I go here, go there. Basically, so I had already said, I really loved the practice. Like I enjoyed working with the clients. And so I'm like, I'm not going to change direction. So I gotta, and then I started to talk to the big financial services company that I work for, and quickly realized like, no dice there. Like I'm not going to be able, it's going to take forever. It's going to be super slow. And so basically my only option was I got to completely leave the system and kind of like recreate things. And that's when I started my business. So that was 2014. I started my business. And so we also realized at that time, like physicians were going through very similar challenges. And we're like, this makes all the sense in the world to like focus on helping physicians work through the same sort of challenges I had just worked through, and really kind of pair up that financial literacy with addressing big life questions so that they could have the courage to ideally, work through things like this. And ultimately it's about living a good life.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting. We could share so many different stories because, like I said, I got fed up with the healthcare system because it was making CEOs rich and then making doctors and staff and patients sicker and making the staff poorer. So, and I'm sure that, financials no different. There's incentives to sell like high fee services, and the whole system is rigged. So, I love the work that you're doing, and just kind of, your story and your journey resonates with so many different individuals. So, kind of we'll talk about this. You work with physicians. Question is, one thing is, why did you specifically focus on physicians as opposed to just kind of, the broad audience? And then we'll talk about, what is the number one frustration with physicians with the financial system?
Yeah, I think so. We really have leaned into working with physicians over the years. A lot of it is this similarity of the challenges. It's like the system and the frustration professionally, and the finances as the tool to gain leverage and make scary changes. And then also, I really love teaching, and financial literacy is a big component as well. So as I'm sure like in the training system of healthcare, there's like zero financial literacy training, or maybe it's getting a little better now. Like there's some, and so it's like the combination of those two things. It's like I had a lot of similarities professionally, helping them through that big change, helping them to ultimately have good solid aim, and then use the financial literacy as the tool, as the method to get where they want to go. And I had already worked with physicians, so I was working in the financial product side of the game. And, physicians are big buyers of disability insurance. So that was one of the ways we made money in the system, by selling disability insurance. So I had the privilege of working with a bunch of physician families there. And I'm like, this is it's a great, niche to specialize in. And it was a natural transition at that point. And that was 2014.
Yeah. One thing talking about is industry challenges, and like I said, there's so much misalignment in values, incentives, and so in your view, what are the key misalignments in the financial advisory and healthcare systems that impact physicians the most?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two big ones. It goes back to the system. You got to follow the money. I'm sure you've heard that. Follow the money, and you'll start to realize. So in the financial services world, 95% of compensation, or where the money is made, essentially, is in managing investments and selling financial products. And if you're a young physician, it's more the products, because you don't have the investments, So if you're a young physician, it's the problem is there's a heavy focus on the products, because the financial industry has to place these products in order to make money for it to all work. And if you're further along and you have wealth, it's the investments. They're very incentivized and tied to managing money, and the more the better, the more they get paid, so that that's the way it's all going to work. The problem with all that for the end customer, the physician, the client, is that's a tiny sliver of good quality financial planning. Is the investments are important and the products are important, but most people we work with have a lot of different struggles. It's I'm getting burned out in my job. This is stressful. I want to give money to charity. I want to pay off my debt. Those things actually are in direct conflict a lot of times with the way that most advisors are compensated. It's if I'm making 1% of your assets, how am I going to confidently tell you let's go take a chunk of your assets to pay off your student loans? Because that's a pay cut.
Yeah,
it's a misalignment of values. And then on the product side, if I'm getting paid to sell you more disability insurance or more life insurance, whatever, I'm never going to be get less. I'm always going to be get more. It's just people are incentivized by money, unfortunately. That's just the way people work.
Yeah. It's just human nature.
Right. And the most dangerous, and unfortunately I was there, but the most dangerous situation is when you have convince yourself that you're able to navigate that without being influenced.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because I'm having a lot of guests such as yourself, CFPs, financial advisors. Which actually reminds me of a lot of the kind of self-employment model where they break free of the traditional model and they start developing their own niches for example, physicians, or kind of because they don't agree with the values and the incentives of the traditional. So they want to actually do some good. So, which is what you're doing there. Kind of moving on is this question is, especially in the younger generation, what I've seen is they understand that a career is not going to be 60 years. It's going to be a portfolio career. It's going to be different skills. They may be applying those skills in different environments and different institutions, and so they understand that, and so they're planning and preparing. Kind of talk about the generational differences, like the older physicians, the boomers, fixing to retire, younger generation physicians, like just in medical school residency. What are their different needs or kind of their similarities, differences, and then we'll dive into that.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of go with the extremes, like late career, very established, we'll assume is one, and then the early career, like just getting started. So the late career, like, assume you've built wealth, like you have wealth. Typically, like a big financial concern is like, do I have enough? Like, do I have enough? And it's interesting, like that seems to be a pressing question well into when people have enough. It's like on average, they cross the line of having enough, at least like from a financial professional, my definition of them having enough, like they still have it after a while. They're like, but what if, but what if? So that seems to be a pretty common question, even for people that have like exceeded that number of having plenty. So having enough is an important thing. And that kind of ties into turning the career off, I guess. And that's a challenge in itself. It's like, what's my identity? So a lot of physicians are very like, as you know, like tied in, like that is their identity. I'm going to kind of jump into some solutions already just because it's applicable, but it's like, we really try to put a focus on like the big questions. I was saying like, it's about the financial literacy and the big questions. Some of the big questions that people really need to think about is like, what's my purpose in life? And it's like, being a good physician is really important, but like most people, when you really peel back the layers, there's a lot more to it than that. And so the sooner you can think about like, what is my purpose in life? What does my ideal life look like? And how do I start taking steps to address that? And then thinking, even if you're younger, like when I retire, like what is my new endeavor, or how do I test drive that? Taking big, long vacations is a good example. It's like taking a 3-week vacation will give you a really good kind of hint at what it feels like to retire. So identity thing, that's a big deal. And I think for the later career physicians, their children or their family is always important. So they're thinking about like, how do I put my kids or even grandkids, like how do I set them up to be on the right track? How do I not spoil them? How do I take care of them but not spoil them? That's always kind of the balance of things. And how do I myself, like if I'm going to have, make sure I have enough, then if I have plenty, then what do I do with the excess? And charitable giving starts to come into play. Like maybe I want to be helping provide for another cause that's important to me. And then the younger physicians, there's a lot of like the similarities are that having a good aim is important. Like having a good direction on what you want your life to become is always important. Mm-hmm. And financial literacy is always important. Yeah. But like the challenges are very different. It's like I have debt, student loans, they're complicated. Forgiveness of student loans is super complicated. And cash flow, like as in maybe I've already had a big pay bump, but if not, I'm about to have a big pay increase. And so how can I be responsible with that? I know I'm behind, like my peers have already done the things, like they have the house. And so I feel pressure to have a family, like I need to buy a house. So how much do I spend? How much should I get a car? Like I've been working hard for so long, I deserve. I mean, like sometimes that's built into the equation. And it's like, how do I use this income stream that's going to be coming in to really start to propel me in the right direction, but still have a good life, have fun, enjoy the money?
The thing that's interesting is, I talked to a lot of med students and early residents, they come to me and ask questions, and a lot of them, because the boomer generation, they were like, take out student loan debt, you'll be able to pay it off. And now the younger generation's like, no, with inflation and taxes and debt, I don't want to be in debt forever. I'm going to limit how much student loans I take. I'm going to go to a more affordable med school. They're all the same, it's just different brand names. And, unless you graduate residency, you can practice. So, and they understand that. And, they're starting to save during med school. Like, like earlier on, med students were poor, like they took on debt, but now they're actually trying to save and, dollar cost average, and which is really interesting. And then what is really interesting is this new emerging class of digital assets. And I get a lot of questions from the younger. They're like, is Bitcoin safe? Is Ethereum safe? The older generations like, no, this is a scam. This is a Ponzi. So what are you getting questions such as that in your client base? Again, this is not financial advice. We're just discussing, topics and trends.
always good to throw that out there. But yeah, that comes up all the time. And I kind of like categorize that as in the realm of like the shiny objects. Not that not all shiny objects are bad, but like it usually is coming about as a result of like some hype, like there's some like excitement going on with it. So you have to be careful not to like get all hyped up in it and the emotion drive the ship on it. Yeah. And that, like I said, that's not to say it's bad. It's just like, you don't want to get all in on something, because we've had people really go all in on it. And we've had some clients get into big trouble with crypto and scams and stuff like that tied to it. And especially when it's leveraged. I mean, you got to be super careful. In fact, probably avoid like leverage and shiny objects mixed together. It's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. And so anyway, crypto and that sort of thing, it's a new thing. So, our general like lean is to be cautious with it. And same thing we would say about anything, like education is a super important, financial literacy, like understand the thing you're investing in and ease in, like don't put your entire wealth in the thing that you're going to invest in. But it's not like the evil, like it's not evil. Like it's promising. It's an interesting new thing that has a lot of promise and could be a valuable piece of your portfolio, especially these people they work with. They got it a long time ago. Like it has become a valuable piece of their portfolio.
Yeah. It's interesting because, for physicians, for average physicians, you're going to do fine because you have a very high income. And as long as you invest it well and you're frugal and, you watch your expenses, but people want to take a little bit more risk. You don't want to go all in and lose everything because it's very risky, and it's still a very nascent industry. So there's a lot of bad actors, and there's regulation and all these small portion just kind of just have exposure, but like I said, not your entire net worth. Yeah. And that's just plain dumb in my opinion. Very interesting question. Look, how can people? I know you got a podcast. How can people contact you, follow you, reach out to you, check out the work that you do, et cetera? Yeah.
So the podcast is Finance for Physicians. So you can check that out. That we do weekly shows. And it's education specific to physicians, financial literacy, but also I think with the spin, what's unique about that is we focus more on using money as a tool, not to get necessarily just rich, but to like live a more fulfilling life. So I think that's important. And as far as reaching out, I think I'm happy to, especially if you have questions, like feel free to email me. You can email me at daniel@financeforphysicians.co. And I love the questions because it's great for like, we can do a podcast on it if it's a little bit more in-depth question. And if it's not, I love just, emailing a response. It's a great way to kind of add a little value for people here and there. So feel free to reach out that way as well.
Yeah. And for all the listeners out there listening, Daniel for coming on, check out his podcast, check out his socials. All of these will be in the links in the show notes. Be sure to give him a follow, subscribe, like, share, comment, etc. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Chris.